So Drop needs a win. They have, I think, been going downhill for the past couple of years, and they have not represented the same value and good decision making that really built them up in the first place. And that's actually why I haven't been reviewing a lot of their newer equipment, because I don't really find it, one, that inspiring, or two, that good for value anymore. Now at $79, the Epos and H3X actually seems poised to be an actual victory for them. And I actually think it is. This makes me inspired to see what both of those companies can do in the future, and I think that this is a step in the right direction. This is also coming from an avid H3X user. I probably have more hours on this headphone than any headphone I have right now. So I'm going to be comparing a little bit to this, even though it's a different category, but I'll try to keep it fair. But I just want to let you know where I'm coming from. Build quality on the H3X is actually better than expected. It does have this slightly soft touch plastic, but the headphone extension mechanism seems really high quality. The hinges seem fairly well built and seem to articulate in smart directions. I'm not sure exactly what the material of the pads are. They do run a tad bit hot, as to be expected for a close back headphone, but they do seem very plush and quite soft for the money. They are a little bit thin from side to side, but they're quite tall and follow the natural shape of an ear. The microphone does have an auto muting mechanism and can adjust in some ways and kind of relatively stick there, which is good to see. And the microphone quality is actually surprisingly good. It leans a little bit on the nasally side, but for a budget headset, I think it actually sounds pretty fantastic. I'll have a mic test at the end. This headphone is a very efficient 25 ohms at 111 dB sensitivity. It can run off of anything, including phones and laptops, no problem at all. You do not need an amplifier for this headphone. For people with more pointy skulls, there is a little bit of a divot cut out in the top of the headband, and that mixed with the good pad design and the really flexible kind of positioning capability of all of its hinges makes for a good overall ergonomic package, especially for $79. For sound quality, the first thing I want to cover is actually dynamics. Dynamics are very important to get right in a gaming headphone. You want a couple things. You want good dynamic range so that things seem realistic and punchy when they need to seem punchy. You want a gunshot to feel and sound like a gunshot and not be this really muted mess. But you also don't want dynamics that are so extreme that you have realistic differences between the loud gunshot sounds and muffled footsteps. Because if you're accommodating for the volume of a loud gunshot, you'll never hear those footsteps. So you want this in between where sounds sound realistic and dynamic, but not so dynamic that they're too realistic and you don't have any gaming advantage. I think this headphone nails dynamics for a gaming headset very, very well. It seems to have a punchy bass response and quite nice top end that really finishes both gunshots and explosions very well. It also happens to play very well with soundtracks. So if you're playing a game like Doom, it can handle the gunshots and the soundtrack in a very satisfying way. Shout out to Mick Gordon, by the way. But I think that this headphone, while it may not have the extreme dynamic range that some audiophiles are seeking, I think for most gamers, this is going to hit that really good, satisfying area of being both realistic-ish, but also having enough compression to really be able to pick up those minute sounds very, very easily. So treble resolution actually seems quite good for the money. If you check out a graph similar to the H3X and a lot of other gaming headphones at this price, after about 10,000 hertz, it does have a relative slope down. I still think there's an advantage to headphones that pick this area a little bit up. There's a few sounds in sound design that come through in this area if you pay attention to it. But I think for 79 bucks, this is very typical of performance, so no knocks there. Below about 10,000 hertz, this is actually quite nice. It has, again, a very satisfying completion to things like gunshots, but it's detailed enough to make sounds really satisfying. So when you shoot a gun and you hear that kind of shell clinging on the ground, you can really pick up that detail, and it's got really good directionality to it. It's got enough of that timbre flexibility to make wood sound wooden and metal sound metallic. It's pretty nice. I don't think for the money it's necessarily the most detailed headphone, but it's definitely not a muffled or weak performer for resolution or detail at, around about 100 bucks. Mid-range is perhaps the area on this headphone that could use the most work, but I do wonder if you would sacrifice gaming performance, because as a gaming performer, it performs very, very well. but as a music performer, this is where this headphone starts to lack a little bit. This headphone does not quite share the same timbre flexibility and kind of warmer, more sultry nature of voices like the bigger brother PC3-8X does. And it's funny because if you look at a frequency response graph that Drop provides, it actually looks like the H3X has more mid-range than the PC3-8X, but actually if you accommodate for how you listen based off the bass response and the treble response, it actually comes across more on the PC3-8X than it does on the H3X. So I find mids way more satisfying on that bigger brother. Now as a closed back gaming headset, do I expect the mid-range here to be perfect? No, not really. I do think it is an area for potential improvement in future generations. As of right now, it's tolerable, it's okay, but not great. Bass response has, I think, the perfect amount of in-game bass. It is elevated and audiophiles are not going to like it, but as far as general gamers, I think that this nails it. It's got enough saturation to make explosions seem impactful. It makes in-game audio actually very satisfying to listen to because things actually feel like they have weight to them. But it's avoiding some of the big mistakes that I think most gaming headset companies make, which is an over-bloated, just boxy, distracting amount of bass. It avoids doing that. So it's got a good saturation level while still maintaining clarity and cleanliness so you can hear through that bass into the mid-range and the treble response without it overshadowing and bleeding into the other ranges. Again, not as technical for you high fidelity listeners as something like an AKG K361, but as a gaming headphone, I think that the performance here is very, very good. I would consider this like a 9 out of 10 for what I would expect for the money. Now, sound staging is kind of interesting because it almost seems like the specificity of imaging is more important than soundstaging width for some gaming headphones like the H3X. This is not nearly as wide as its open back counterparts like the 3.7X or the 3.8X, but it is just as predictable in its performance. And granted, part of this is due to Call of Duty Warzone 2's over-engineered sound design, but that makes that over-engineered sound design even more crazy on a really, really good gaming headset like this. The one downside is, especially with Warzone 2, is that the sound design seems to not always work properly. Not every game is like this, and I'm sure with updates it'll get better, but yeah, like it felt like hacks using this headset on that game. With this headphone, you can hear things from so far away and with such precise imaging that you can tell exactly what direction they're coming from and how far away they are. All you have to do is pay attention to it and it can tell you so much information about the game. And I think mice and high refresh rates are really strong considerations for most gamers for a gaming performance benefit, but I think that sounds can give you a massive advantage if you just pay a little bit closer attention with a really capable headset like this one. Okay, as far as alternatives, I think if you are into music, I have a couple of suggestions. If you want an open back headphone around the same price, I would recommend the SHP 9600 from Philips. If you need a closed back headphone for music, I'd recommend the AKG K361. I think that's a little bit more accurate through its bass, mid-range, and treble response, but neither of those headphones are headsets and they do not come with microphones, and that is where the H3X sticks out and is probably going to be my top recommendation for a closed back under $100 headphone from this point forward. If you have a little bit more money, I do think the performance benefits are worth it for the PC3-8X. I think recently it was on sale for Black Friday for like $119, so hopefully you picked it up. I'm still going to be sticking with that headphone personally. Looking at this in a bottle though, I am very impressed with the performance capability of this device. For gaming alone, I would rate this like a 9 out of 10. I think it's really solid if you are forced to use a closed back headphone. There's not really a whole lot more that I think would be fair to ask for the money, besides maybe a little bit more mid-range in the future. Okay guys, thanks a lot for watching. Before I go though, I will do a quick sound test to close this video out. So while we do the microphone test for the H3X, we're also going to be plugging some future content like the Lear Plus video I have coming out, my favorite headphones this year coming out, and of course, some more gaming related videos. Now the microphone on this I actually think is pretty decent. It sounds very clear and concise. It doesn't have too many negative characteristics. It does lean again a little bit nasally, but for $79 I think the performance here is very, very good. Okay, thanks for watching. See you guys next time. Bye.